Welcome to A Better HR Business, the podcast that looks at how HR consultants and HR tech firms grow their businesses and how they help their employers to get the best out of their people. Remember, for show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Okay, let's get started.
Hello, thanks for joining me again. Great to have you along. And I'm really looking forward to today's conversation with Luis Garcia. Luis is the president and co-founder of a very cool HR technology company called Pete, and that's at pete.com. And Pete is an Orlando-based HR tech startup that leverages AI to help employers deliver personalized workforce learning at scale. And they help businesses optimize their training initiatives from onboarding to regulatory compliance, product knowledge, technical skills, etc., and all without requiring additional training resources. So I'm very keen to learn how they do it and hear the backstory. But firstly, Luis, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben.
Great to have you along. So yeah, you have co-founded the business, and I have to say, people go and check out the website. It's such a fresh, very cool design. I know it's nothing to do with anything, but I just love the aesthetics of it. But yeah, could you give us the backstory to the formation of Pete?
Yeah, so my background is in engineering and in learning. And I started my career as a software engineer. In the early 2000s, I found myself in higher education with the task of creating an online university, which I had no idea how to do. But I, like engineers do, I created pilot programs and things to measure and to understand how learning and digital learning actually worked. And end up designing a learning management system for the university. And I started the operations of Orlando University, which ended up growing very, very, very fast. And ended up being one of the fastest growing online universities in the country. So 2 years in, we were having 5,000 degree-seeking students, which is the same population we had on our campus, which took 30 years to build. And then 3 years later, we had 12,000, and we had created 1,000 jobs, and we were bringing in annual revenue north of $180 million. So it was very interesting journey from the business point of view, but also from the learning point of view. It got me really familiar with the challenges of creating training for online learning. When you're in a classroom and somebody's teaching you, and if the person is a good expert and a good communicator, you feel like, okay, I'm being educated. But if you remove the teacher, now the PowerPoint behind that teacher is actually doing the teaching. So you realize very quickly that those materials have to be really optimized for learning. And that's actually very hard to do. So that's one problem that we faced in digital learning. The second problem is actually a learning problem that have existed forever, which is how do you evaluate learning? How do you know the learner actually learned? And somebody invented tests at some point as a method of evaluation. And it does this job for certain things, but it's not very effective in terms of evaluating learning. But it's the most scalable one that we have, because the more effectively would be to do project-based evaluation or simulation of situations, or even question and answers from the expert to the learner in a deep, personalized way. So none of these methods are very scalable. So we are stuck with the traditional methods of testing. And when we did digital learning, we automated testing, which has made it even easier for the instruction, but very poor for the learner. So those are the two problems that really nagging me over time. It's like, how do you create materials for training at scale? And how do you evaluate learning at scale? And my co-founder had been a tech entrepreneur here in Orlando, and have worked through several companies, starting them and exiting. And the last one was very successful. It rose to the status of, it's a fintech, and it was rose to the status of a unicorn. It was the first one out of Orlando. And in the last couple of years when he was there, they acquired 4 different companies. And so there's a lot of new people coming into the organization that needed to be integrated. And he thought, I'll just create some courses. And he realized how hard it was. He said that he thought it was going to take him a couple hundred man hours, end up being a new budget with new people, thousands of hours to do it effectively. So when he exited that company, then we met each other. We have been friends for a while in the local technology ecosystem of Orlando. So he told me that he wanted to start a company to solve that problem. And I asked him, would you help me with it? And I said, absolutely. I want to solve that problem too. And also added the problem about evaluation. So that's the origin story of Peat. We targeted specifically small, medium-sized businesses because, in my experience, large businesses, and by that I mean over 1,000 employees, usually have training departments, and training departments with people that are experts at that, with a platform already chosen, and so on. And smaller companies, like less than 50 employees, usually do shadowing and other methods of training that are more organic, and usually does the job. But the companies between 50 and 500 employees have the training problem and that don't have enough resources to go start a department, so they cannot live with the problem. So that's exactly who we target. Our platform allows you to create training materials and evaluation of learning at scale for workforce learning specifically.
Got it. And it's such a perfect time for Peat, I'm guessing, because I know those companies, that sweet spot, the 50 to 200, the 50 to 500, where they've mostly been living by PowerPoint, an Excel list, or some sort of database, and maybe some sort of Camtasia or whatever to record some videos. And CEO, could you please record a welcome to our onboarding staff? Pretty terrible experience.
That's right.
But it gets the job done. But I think the world and COVID and everything has evolved so rapidly that the time is ripe. Is that right for what Peat does?
Absolutely. When you observe the workforce that we have today, they have grown with digital education already, and they're expecting their employer to be up to date and offer them training to be better at their job. They don't see it as a benefit that they're happy to receive it. They're almost demanding it. The data is also very clear that if you have a robust learning program, your employees are happier, they stay longer, and that they provide better service to your customers. So the business metrics very much support the idea of having a learning program within your organization.
So tell us the nuts and bolts. What's underneath the bonnet? What does Peat do? Now, I know I said in the intro there that it leverages AI and so on, but what does it actually mean? And what does someone get if they buy Peat?
So what we built was a piece of software that is an orchestrator of different algorithms of AI. So we have different providers like OpenAI and Synthesia and 11 Labs for voice. But our algorithm has the rules of instructional design. Instructional design is the practice of translating your expertise into a training experience. Mm-hmm. Usually you have to hire a person to get the expertise out of an expert and introduce that into a course. And that's what our algorithm does. The company usually already have some materials, like an example of onboarding that you brought up, and have the employee manual and in their website and all these materials that are already created. And we can take those, ingest them, and then our system turns them into a course. All with the narration of whoever you want to narrate the courses. So in some cases, like the CEO, we don't need to put the CEO on camera or in front of a microphone. We just need a snippet of his voice, and then we clone the voice throughout the courses. That's for the course creation portion. The platform also creates what's called in education learning outcomes. They say, what are the things that people have to have learned? And based on those learning outcomes, then we have an engine that we call a skills simulation that then can act like it was an expert asking you questions or put you through a situation or shepherd a process or be just an expert that you can ask questions to in order to evaluate your learning against those learning outcomes. And all that is wrapped around a learning management system. So where you put the courses, the learner scores, and take them there so you can track their progress, receive the certificate when they end, and things like that.
Yeah, I love that. Wow. So there's so much there. The instructional design set up inside the algorithm. So in other words, you give it all this information, all these resources, some videos and documents, upload it all. It then sits inside an instructional design framework. In other words, it takes all that, makes sense of it, turns it into a learning program that actually delivers the learning that people find engaging, that they actually consume, use, etc. It's done in probably a pretty funky way, I'm guessing, if it's leveraging this AI and new best practice. You mentioned, I think you said Synthesia is an example of AI video generation tools and stuff. So for people listening, the CEO might record a speech, but then you could go and record 10 different speeches by the CEO by modeling their speaking style and stuff, because that gets past the old problem of you're trying to capture that wisdom to communicate employee information for communications, quarterly reviews and things like that. Try and sit there and record an interview with the CEO, and it's trying to get onto their calendar and diary and stuff like that. Whereas this is leveraging technology to scale that.
The head of sales, whoever the company wants to represent the expertise of the topic that you're going to deliver, we can.
You mentioned sales, but I was thinking as you were talking earlier about that could be used, for instance, for customer service, that yes, you could upload your documents and maybe some training manuals or some recordings and things, but also you could probably leverage all the amazing information that's out there through AI to fill in some of those gaps so that maybe you need to tell your staff, your frontline staff, do smile when the customer walks in or whatever it may be. But
you're actually right. In fact, one of the things that our skill simulation does, you can put a customer service person through an example of a situation and say, okay, there's a customer calling in about this problem, is very upset. The purpose of the simulation is to de-escalate the call and then evaluate you on that.
Very cool. And by the way, if you're listening to this, I'm always a believer that an angry call from a customer can actually be turned into an upsell. If you look after them, they suddenly love you. So it's an amazing thing. What about the company itself? I know you've had tremendous success with turning it into an online university in the previous place, and the crazy numbers, by the way. You should write a book about that one day. And, your co-founder also had great success in the tech world. Heat itself has been growing. I know you picked up some marquee customers or clients. You've got the Orlando City Soccer Club. Yeah. And by the way, if I wasn't doing what I'm doing, I would be a professional soccer player also if I had the skills. So yeah, I'm very jealous of that. And the other big aspect I noticed was you acquired another learning platform. So it was Pluto LMS. Is that right? Could you tell us about that? And just put that into the framework or the context of where the business is and how you've sort of scaled or grown so quickly.
Yeah, so thank you. We are about to turn 2 years old. So we're still relatively early in the process. And we've been very lucky that we started generating revenue almost from the onset. And we had a very good community here in Orlando City Soccer Club being one of those that took a chance on us and a very small company with a very small platform and participating in the process of being a customer and while we're still developing the platform. In fact, our first customer, very, very, very first customer, we didn't even have an interface. It was command line, and we were creating courses out of command line. But it did the job, and we're being evolved, and obviously today it's much more sophisticated than that. But what we found was, as we went out to the world and we acquired more customers, is that we kind of saw two types of customers. The ones that they had the problem of needing a more formalized training program, but have no learning experience, don't know what a learning management system is. And our platform is very good for them. As a learning management system, although I don't consider Pete a learning management system, but it has learning management system features because you have to put the courses there, you got to track the learners, give them certificates, things like that, right? It works very well for them. So we're happy with those customers. But we also sometimes attracted other customers that perhaps have implemented learning programs before. And they're so very impressed with the power tools, the AI-driven tools, but wanted more LMS functionality, like a real LMS, which we're not. More sophisticated reporting and other interactivity. So to those customers, it was a more difficult sell to have. And we also, if we wanted to get into larger customers, like between 500 and 1,000 employees. Now at that point, they probably have a trainer or an instructional designer or a learning manager or something like that. And it's hard for those folks to look at a learning solution without the learning management system lens. So we thought, why don't we just go get one that is more ahead in the journey as a learning management system that we can integrate our tools into without us trying to catch up with the learning management system functionality.
Yeah.
So we found this company in South Africa called Pluto LMS. It's been around for 8 years, had a really impressive footprint of customers around the world. I think they had over 30, and it was profitable. And the owner was looking into leaving, and we had a really good deal, so we acquired them.
How did you find them in the first place? Were you going to brokers or how did you come across them?
Yeah, so there are platforms today to go find deals like that where a lot of solopreneurs that have developed technologies go out and sell them. And we were looking for a partner like that. We were thinking of either that or HR platform that would like to embed something like us in it as a channel partner, because there are a lot of HR platforms that do have learning functionality in it. So we thought that one of those two things could work out. We saw several ones, and this was the one that it really makes sense for us.
Yeah. And I know I'm not being flippant, but I mentioned that it's a beautiful website and stuff, but you guys clearly take the design element, the UX, the UI part seriously. And I know from my background as an HR person, LMSs have traditionally been pretty ugly. They're kind of modeled on databases. and folders and stuff. So I think that's a great acquisition because you'll take an LMS sort of system, incorporate it, and you've turned it into something that's really, beautiful to use. And that's important to end users, and it helps sell
Absolutely.
things, I find anyway. Can you explain how you got your first customers versus what you're doing nowadays and how that's evolved?
Yeah, so I get asked this question a lot from podcasts about startups, and I'm so glad because I think that your best potential is always local. So both Jacques and I had strong networks in the Orlando area. We've been here for a very long time. I lived in Orlando for over 20 years. And if it is a community that really wants to support the local businesses, they'll open, like Orlando is, they open the doors to you. All our initial customers were contacts of ours in the area that knew that we were very new, that the tool were probably going to be evolving, but they liked the idea of helping a startup and that locally. And so that's how Orlando City came to be. Not too long later, Orlando Venues, which is the portion of the Orlando City that manages the other stadiums, like the Kia Center where the Orlando Magic play. Things that they became a customer very quickly too. One of our local banks also became a customer. So leverage your local network, and especially those that are more innovative, that want to bring new tools into their community and want to elevate their local startup. That's what we started. And the first year, practically all of it was from that network.
Yeah, I like that. And you mentioned earlier that originally with the very first customer, it was just operating through lines of code, so it wasn't pretty. But again, that's the startup mentality. And what is Airbnb? I think they started with a spreadsheet and maybe not even
absolutely.
a website.
And many of them, I do not recommend going into stealth mode and not telling anybody and then coming out a year later with a product that probably people want and probably people don't. In some cases, it's necessary, but if it's not necessary, the fastest you put that product in front of customers and you can learn from their struggles, the better. Today, I will say 80% of our roadmap is driven by our customers.
For listeners, just to fill in that gap, and it's such a tactical or micro question, but when you say leverage your immediate network, what do you mean? Is that a message to someone? Say, could you introduce me to them? And then what are you asking them? I'm just curious about the practical.
All of it, right? Is going to local events, meeting people, telling them what you do, and calling everybody in your Rolodex. I don't know what the age of your listeners is, but your local contacts. You know more people than you think you know. If you leverage that, in my case, and Jacques, which is calling our friends, and they are in positions in other places, and say, we're developing this platform. Love to show it to you. No strings attached. You just want to get your reaction. Give me half hour of your time. Today with Zoom and all this, it's easy. You can call anybody around the country and not have to get on a plane to show them anything, and they'll give you a half hour. Sometimes that turn into, this is very interesting. I'd love to consider it. Let me connect you to, my head of HR or whatever. Or they do it themselves. Or they say, not for us, but you just reminded me yesterday having lunch with my friend that is CEO on so-and-so, and they were talking about this problem, and then you get another call like that. So before we spend a single dollar of marketing, we didn't spend dollars in marketing until we had real funding coming when we went through a seed round, then had the dollars to go do marketing. Before that, it was just calling contacts and putting the platform in front of them and getting them to buy it, even if it was for very little price. Because once somebody's paying for it, then you get to say that somebody's paying for it. And then the next person coming. So we had never given it away for free.
And it gives you that confidence to make more calls because you can start to show the logos and explain the experiences and so on. So what about now, 2 years into it, how has your sales and marketing approach changed? For instance, I saw that you've done some PR, getting the word out there about investment rounds and Orlando City soccer team. So what are you guys doing in terms of sales and marketing these days?
So after we went through a seed round, we raised $2.2 million, and then we had, more funding to go build a commercial team. So we went and hired 3 salespeople, experience doing SaaS education sales. And we also went and got ourselves a CMO with a creative agency so start building what is the digital inbound machine, right? And we started first with very little money, just experimenting on messaging, trying to understand exactly what was going to resonate. And we did that for a couple of months. And once we kind of settled in a message and a creative that we thought people were responding to, then we started investing in different marketing channels. Surprisingly, you will think for a B2B company like us, LinkedIn would be the right place for us. We did start in LinkedIn, but it was, we were not really getting traction there. And our CMO suggested, let's go to Facebook and Meta. And we went there and we got traction really quickly. Still, then the problem always with the Meta platforms is like they suck you in and then you're all depending on them. And one day they flip a chip and then you get no leads anymore. And so we're developing other channels. We recently launched in Reddit as well. And we also have Google. And we're going back to LinkedIn now that we have more budget. But yeah, we have a marketing department that does creative and messaging and places ads, and a sales department that take those leads and then they run them through the funnel. Today, all our sales come from that. We are out of us calling our friends. We still call friends. But the majority of our sales comes from the digital advertising that we do and the sales team that pursue them.
And I love that the migration or the move to Facebook or Meta ads. So they're ads that you're running there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not just content. Because I think people, when they hear LinkedIn or...
We also do organic content. And today, 15% of our leads are organic.
Okay.
Which is very interesting because it's such a small brand. But that's part of the PR effort as well, right? I do a lot of podcasts myself and we do a lot of those effort. Plus, the organic content that we constantly publish in our channels now.
Look, you and I are both from hot places, but I like to use the snowball analogy that you get a small snowball and as it rolls down the hill, it builds up in size. So that's that. All of the stuff you're doing is starting to accumulate and build up speed and size. I'm curious, you've done a lot of time and effort into working out the right messaging. Do you have different messages for different audiences or situations?
We experiment a lot. Marketing is a lot about experimentation. So yes, we do run in different experiments on different messages to different audiences. Some of them work, some of them don't work and get discarded. But yes, it's all about optimizing.
So what would be sort of overall learnings? And also feel free to use the learnings you had from your growing that online university, because amazing story there too. But what would you share with other HR tech founders and marketing teams in terms of growing their business in this environment? We've got post-COVID, everyone's online, LinkedIn's very crowded stuff. The world has changed a lot. What's your advice to them for growth?
We are going through a very exciting time. The marketplace, specifically in HR, the marketplace have changed a lot in terms of how the worker is brought into a company. Hiring, on the negative side, I believe that hiring is more difficult than ever. And for both the job seeker and the person hiring, but also the employee changed a lot. In the digital world, the employees doesn't want to go to full-time to an office anymore, but that also means that you can hire people from all over the world. It's very, very different. And also the new workers are very used to learning on their own, to learning digitally, and this is something that you have to react to. So it could feel very chaotic. My advice is to just embrace it, embrace the environment, embrace the new tools. AI can be a very powerful tool for your job and for your organization. Don't deny that and just go embrace it. It's not going to solve every problem and it's not going to replace everybody, but it will elevate what you do. So most definitely embrace that. Like our organization, would have not been able to get this kind of traction 5 years ago. Our early employees were all of them from outside the US. We could get great talent for very little money. And today we continue to have that format. We acquired a company in South Africa and it's really not much of a different than what we always have been operating. So that's a tremendous advantage today to be open to have people all over the world. It's very cost effective. So all of those things that are happening are good things.
Absolutely. I second that. And even getmorehrclients.com, with video and audio and all sorts of things out of South Africa and ad campaigns out of South Africa and virtual assistants in Romania and Philippines and many more. So yeah, I think for any team that needs to either expand or manage costs or get expertise that they can't access locally or just labor shortages or whatever, that's a great model to adopt. Yeah. Finally, for people listening to this, just recap on your ideal customers in case they come across them and could refer them to Pete. And then secondly, what should they do if they want to learn more about Pete?
Absolutely. Thank you. So our ideal customer is a company that is growing, either growing staff or growing product set, because those are usually the two triggers for the need of training programs, either velocity of hiring because you have turnover or because you're growing, and or velocity of product, either because of more features or more product SKUs. And between 50 and 500 employees, and experiencing that velocity and don't know how to keep up with it. And usually what they do is that they pull experts and leaders from areas and try to turn them into trainers and say, well, just do a little bit of your job, be this. And then they usually how they patch it, but it's not a good patch. Those folks don't necessarily know how to translate their expertise into training. And it's going to take them longer and harder than they thought. So you're really pulling them from their jobs. So that's our ideal customer, the ones that have that velocity and don't have a training program, or already an effective one, because sometimes they create a course and they leave it there for 3 years and then no one's come back to to update it because no one wants to leave their job to do that again. So that's our ideal customer. If you want to learn more about Pete, then you can go to our website, pete.com. That's PETE.com/podcast. You give us your information and we'll call you right back.
Excellent. Well, Luis, I congratulate you on all you've achieved so far, and you've built an amazing product, and I think it's going to make a difference to companies that use you, because not just the learning and development training side of things, but also the employee attraction and retention. It always drove me crazy in times of skill shortages that employers would say, oh, there's no good people around and our people are leaving, whatever. You've got to make the effort to fill that pipeline ahead of time. And one of those things is helping people onboard, learn the skills, develop the skills, learn ways to progress up that career ladder if that's what they want to do, or get better at their jobs and things like that. And so I think you're creating a way to make that happen. So well done for that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks to all the listeners. Looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks for joining us today on A Better HR Business, the podcast that explores the world of HR consulting and HR tech businesses. For show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Remember to subscribe and share the show with any friends who are busy growing a HR business. Thanks, and see you next time.